That makes two of us, by the way.
Say that again, Michael.
In the beginning, I didn't like Stephen. I didn't like the sound of his voice, and I didn't like his firm. But that didn't last long. We've come to love him like nobody else.
There you go. Who else? Jack? Andy? Jack's coming up. You coming up mute?
There's nothing wrong with Stephen's voice. Puts a tremendous amount of effort into every week, which is, and when I say every week, I mean disciplined, consistent, and obviously open to debate, which is what we're here for whenever we think Stephen's not right, which is infrequent, but once in a while.
Never in doubt. Thank you.
Hey, Mark,
Yep.
the what I delivered at the last celebration of Stephen was a riveting, interesting, and insightful set of remarks that hopefully he remembers, because there's some possibility that none of the rest of us do remember what I said then. I would, however, at this point, like to add some context to what does it mean to endure 250 straight Tuesdays. And he has outlasted Jimmy Carter, George Bush Sr., and Joe Biden. None of them could make it beyond the first 4 years, but Stephen has gone sailing by, and that fancy research that Bill does, it reveals that people want him, Stephen, to go another 250. Oh my gosh. And he's a two-termer. He's our two-termer. He doesn't belong to anybody. He doesn't belong to others. You know, his firm may manage 1.8 billion, but that's incidental to his intimate relationship with all of the people that are on this call or wish they were on this call.
Fair enough. Thank you, Jack. Actually, we had an idea that you're going to take over for the next 250. But we'll come back to that.
It'll just be one session, though.
Yeah, it's funny how ideas work. That's an idea I've never heard.
Sarah, you have your hand up.
Yes, so in addition to all that, I also wanted to add, I really enjoy also the global insight that Stefan delivers, and not only just focusing on just US equities, but how it fits the global picture, how the industry trends move, and as you said, Marco, he's on top of every news and already knows it before everyone. So thank you again.
Thank you, Sarah.
Samir?
Yeah, so I had a question actually about the events in Naples and Miami. So I'm understanding now it's not like I thought originally that the event.
Samir, you're
I'm sorry.
on the robotic. Anyone else while Samir gets himself together?
He's the one and only Uncle Stephen, and everybody reads the headlines, but because Stephen reads all the headlines, we get the color. It's not just the black and white, but we get the full color edition every week. He's the man.
So, Denise, you have your hand up, but you never even met Stephen, but you have a comment on him already.
Yeah, but you're kind of projecting only positive things, so I cannot help myself. And as a newcomer, say that in my 12-year kind of a VC focused career, this has been so far the most interesting and fascinating rabbit hole I have ever taken chances with. So I really am looking forward to meet you all in person.
This whole keeps going.
That's well said, though.
Yep.
All right, Samir.
Mark, yeah.
Samir, you're back.
Hopefully this is better. So I just had a question, final question about Naples and Miami. It looks like Naples is a 3-day event and Miami is only a 1-day event. They're priced the same. The issue is that the networking time available at Naples is significantly more than Miami. I may not be able to.
You're right. Why don't I make a unilateral decision to increase my Naples? I should do that.
Well, I'm not able to make it to Naples perhaps, right? So so I guess my question is there a way around that? Right? If we're not able to leave Miami, and so that's I guess a question for after.
We can talk about Miami does have the slightly larger group, but we'll come back.
All right, we'll take it offline. Thank you.
Anyone else? Duncan, you're an OG guy on these briefings. Any reflections?
On Stephen?
Yeah, or in general?
Well, I mean, honestly,
And Mariana?
I've been in the industry, for a very long time. I really think what Stephen puts together on a weekly basis is unbelievable. I mean, I just feel like, he hits changes and trends before other people. I mean, it's kind of like, I don't know how many times this has happened. I have this like sudden thought that hits my mind about something that's going on or something changing. We go to the Tuesday call and Stephen's got a presentation on it. I'm like, I don't know how he does it. Very impressive.
You do some of that yourself. You talked that fixed income is sexy again, back a couple of years ago, before anyone thought it was. You also, you hit insurance before insurance is you're in the zeitgeist. Maybe you didn't call it before.
You're kind. I hit and run. Stephen's there every week, and it's just amazingly consistent. So anyway, Stephen,
Michael Hammer.
Oh, well, Stephen, I just have to say, this is the first time I've heard anyone refer to you as a rabbit hole.
I think he was talking about this.
I'm fine with that.
I wouldn't necessarily put him in the whole rabbit hole camp. But
I have to say, I enjoy your Tuesday briefings. They're always interesting.
Indeed.
What makes them is the group, though. It's the interplay and the wisdom and knowledge that this group collectively brings to the table. The in-depth knowledge on so many subjects is awesome because I don't have that. I just do the inch deep, mile wide. You guys do the mile deep, and it's really fascinating.
Yeah, but if we push you, you go deep. But it's like the time Bill Eichler, someone mentioned blockchain, and then he took it over for 10 minutes.
Yeah.
But yeah. So again, mea culpa. This happened. We did this 200 last year after Florida. Florida sort of dominated because we had 30 cities and 10 countries. But we do have London. So Mariana is there with Martin and Carolina.
Oh,
So
Jeffrey is also here, but he just took a call. So yeah, we wanted to give you, Stephen, our support from London.
Thank you, Mariana.
What do you like about these briefings? What do you guys like about these briefings across the pond?
Okay, so it's very hard, obviously, not to be biased. And Stephen managed somehow not to be biased over and over and over again, even though sitting in America, he was always very objective in terms of rest of the world. So yeah, opinions are one thing and facts are the other. And he delivered both, but facts first. And then when someone asked him about opinion, he would obviously say, but that's, I would say, one of the best traits of Stephen, but also his personality. So we love him dearly.
Thank you.
Yeah, strong tip of the hat to Mark and Stephen. Always find this interesting. You see behind the headlines and you're ahead of the curve, and really appreciate it. Keep up the great work.
Thank you, Mark. Giovanni?
Luck beats. We need Stephen in London more often, by the way, and we need equivalent of Stephen here as well.
That's a harder one.
Well, we have issues here as well, so we need someone to be
we're
not
with
biased.
Giovanni, do you want to say something?
luck is preparation meets opportunity. And so, I think the time that I gained Mark's respect is when I predicted the impact of COVID-19.
Yes.
So Stephen allows me to be prepared so that I can be lucky. So I really appreciate Stephen's insights on the markets, the economy, and allows me to make a far more informed decision for my allocations. Thank you very much, Stephen.
Thank you, Giovanni. And Giovanni got the pandemic call in January of 2020 in Miami.
Yeah, it was
At the dinner.
It was the end of January, but
Yeah.
still.
It was at a dinner.
It was in January.
Yeah. And it was really the first time somebody was talking about it as a pandemic level, not an epidemic level. So
Yeah, I never went to the root of how he knew that, but we'll have to do that this year. And Giovanni, you wanted to talk about sports in Naples later today?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Anyone else with a comment?
I just want to echo what Gio said. Stephen, what I think you're acutely brilliant at is explaining highly complex global cross-asset macro, distilling it down to what makes sense at a particular time and saying it in a very lyrical degree of clarity that the broad breadth of the group can understand, which is a rarity. You're not talking to Alan Greenspan or Bernanke. You're talking to normal people, and it's a pleasure. And you always do it with such grace and modesty. And thank you for that.
thank you, Anthony. Much appreciated.
Yeah, even though he didn't grow up in the Midwest, he went to school in the Midwest, sort of.
I'm not sure if the Pennsylvanians would consider Pennsylvania Midwestern these days.
The original Midwest. I don't know, Barb, did you go to a Midwestern school?
Ah, Penn State, you got it. We should be playing tonight, but oh well.
Yesterday night. Yeah, I know when you're not playing, you don't pay attention. I get it.
I am paying attention for next year.
So I
Just
just
everybody
learned,
else. Yeah.
I just learned something about Kent State today that I didn't know.
Okay.
They don't cancel classes until the wind chill is -20.
Okay. I went to Ann Arbor. I don't remember them ever canceling classes. So there.
I was gonna say an hour from the Ohio border and just south of Lake Ontario. Don't ever remember cancel classes ever.
We don't cancel classes. Penn State cancels classes. That's right.
We
Okay,
do
thank you for that.
not cancel classes.
Thank you for that comment.
Liberal arts schools that cancel classes.
Yeah. Well, I sort of like this live tribute rather than the videos in a way, but a lot of people couldn't make it. But we'll make it up at the 300th, or God forbid the 500th.
God forbid is right. That should be retiring time.
Let's think ahead, because I was at Armin Sarkisian asked a question at his November conference about humanity in light of AI. All these we're talking about hypersonic drones, with this new universe we have, and we were also talking with Dekai, talking about thinking of AI as our children, grooming it, and to be the best parents of these AIs rather than let them control us. But can humanity survive? Was the question. Do we succeed or survive with this evolution? Do we make it to the 500th? Those are some of the questions.
What do you think?
He's a good politician. He led everyone else, but there were some real worry warts there, and then Pollyannish people. So, but it's still a maybe that's our question. That'll be our question is how do we see the world let's just tuck these away. How do we see, what topics will we be discussing? Bill Deichler, are you there? Maybe that should be part of Survey 19.
I was just gonna say, yeah, that's survey 19.
Hey, Bill, put define survive. That's one of the questions.
That is very true.
We're going to switch over to learn about GDP, productivity, demographics, and immigration. So with that, are you ready? Usually you need 30 seconds. Okay, go for it.
I was trying to get away from, move on to the presentation quickly. So let me see if I can get my deck.
Okay.
There we go.
If anyone has any other questions about Florida, let me know. We'll address them after this.
All righty. So our current economic and social systems have been built on two primary forces. One is decades of growing populations, and the second is globalization. And both of those are under pressure right now due to conflicts and other issues that we'll touch on. But we've seen billions of people come out of poverty over the last 20 years. We've seen some of the most incredible economic growth in our history. But we're now in a world where the conditions that got us here, that drove global growth, are changing. Add to that, you have AI promising to change the way we live, work, and govern. Climate change is here, and it's disrupting our world and will continue to. And to get out of the challenges that we're seeing today, we need a combination of higher productivity, effective migration policies, and higher fertility rates to deal with some of the issues that we're facing. So let's just take a look at what growth looks like, and then some of the challenges around that, demographics, and then we'll get into productivity. So as you can see here, we've been at a pretty steady state globally in terms of growth. We've managed to mitigate the economic cycles by throwing more monetary and fiscal policy stimulus in the last 15 years than we have, I think, ever in history, certainly on a scale unseen before. You have advanced economies, which look like they're growing at a pretty steady state around just shy of 2%, which is not great growth. And you have the developing economies in the 3 to 4s. What's this is masking is big divergences underneath the covers here. So when you look back from 19 to last year, over that 5-year period, you had the emerging markets, ex-China, seeing some very strong growth. You had the US seeing some strong growth, but you had China take a big step back. Advanced economies, ex the US, going the wrong way, and Germany and China being the poster child for changing terms of trade and how the global economy is shifting. And the two leading manufacturers are now seeing manufacturing move away and seeing the declining growth rates that go with that. So stepping back, what drives GDP growth per capita and GDP growth overall? It's really two things, population and productivity. Population is really two elements, the age mix, which is your fertility, how long people live, and how much migration you see going on, as well as how much you get for each individual working in terms of labor force participation hours and the employment rate. Productivity is really just the measure of how much you get for each hour worked. And really, we're in a very different world than we've been in for most of the last 20 years, because we're starting to see population peaking in some areas. Globally, it's not projected to peak until 2084 at just shy of 10.3 billion people. And then it's starting to continue to slide down up to 2100. But we're already seeing the first wave hit, and we're seeing that peaking in certain regions and nations already. We'll get into that. So the first wave is the early regions. The second wave is going to be other regions, ex the sub-Saharan Africa, and the third wave is sub-Saharan Africa. And what you can see in this chart is that the dark blue at the top is the 65 and older. The next blue lines is the 15 to 64, which is the working age. And then below that is the under 15. And why are these charts so important is it's saying that we are losing our working class group and rapidly aging out. And at the same time, you're not backfilling the working class group because the under 15 is in decline. And to put it in perspective, I mentioned this last week, but the Japanese Center for Aging projected last week that in 695 years, which I know is a long way out, 25, they're projecting that there will be one child in Japan under age 15. So they'll be number one in their class. They won't have many people to play with. They will be the fastest and slowest kid in the class. But it also speaks to how spending is going to go on, and we'll touch on this in a minute. Here's a different look at it from the first wave and from regions and then countries and the later wave countries. And you get a sense between 2023 and 2021, China's projected to drop 55%, the Greater China region, 56%. Advanced Asia going to see almost a 30% decline in their population during this time. So these are massive population moves, and it's really based on the fact that we have a fertility problem that's driving this, and we have migration issues or immigration policies that are flawed that are adding to this. But you can see from this chart, from the 1950s in the top boxes all the way through to 2023, a steady decline in fertility rates where in the 50s, everywhere in the world was above replacement, above the 2.1% replacement rate. In 65, you started to see it a little bit in Europe. And then in the 80s, you had North America and Central Europe and Eastern Europe. Go to the 95s, it's spreading. And then fast forward to 2023, and you have most of the world in decline, below replacement, and you have China below 1%, which is actually a very troubling sign of things to come there. What this is leading to is big strain on governments because the support ratios for the working population are declining and those who need the support are growing. So to give you a sense, in 1997, we had just shy of 10 people working for everyone over 65. That support ratio is projected to decline to today to around 6.2 on its way to under 4%. And that's overall, that's masking the underlying problems.
Under 4% or under 4?
Under 4, I'm sorry, under 4 people for everyone over. So, but if you go to other countries, look at Western Europe, you're going to be down below 2. That's not a great number.
Where's Japan?
Japan, I have to go back into the report and get those numbers, but they're in a bad way. I mean, Japan's already in decline. I think they're losing about 1 million people a year to their population numbers. So it just gives you a sense that this is a bad setup for governments who are already strained financially. And so what you're going to see is government deficits increase because you're going to have fewer people paying tax revenues, more people living off their income, spending, and that's going to continue to worsen. You can see from this chart, Spain, the UK, and the US. And the US has good demographics in this time period. So it just shows you how much strain's coming. The other thing that's an important shift of spending and important for us as investors is increases to healthcare spending, lower spending on education, because we'll have fewer people in the system. We'll have advances in AI making the potential for education much less expensive. But then we have more people that we have to take care of on the healthcare side without income coming in. So a very unusual dynamic that's at play here. So you have this population problem, you have a demographic issue, you have people living longer. China and Japan are becoming, North Korea and South Korea are becoming among the biggest nursing homes in the world, with population problems that are really straining the government finances, but also straining how businesses operate, how you think about your investments for the long term. So that's going to put a bigger emphasis on productivity because we'll have fewer workers with big skills gaps and bigger problems in defining the skills, particularly if education spending is going the other way. So what this chart shows you is age mix is going to be a problem everywhere in the world from 2030 to 2050. But what you've seen from 97 to 2023 is that it's really been a problem throughout, and that it's been productivity that's driven any of the returns. And for the last 5 years, productivity has basically declined around the world because we had governments throwing money at all the problems that you weren't forced to be as productive as you needed to be because the government stepped in and overstimulated the system. So they put 33% of GDP to work from May of 20 or February of 20 to May of 2021. So we put 23% of global GDP to work to solve what was a 6% GDP problem. And that actually overstimulated the system where you didn't need to be as productive as a government or as a corporation because you had the tailwinds of low interest rates and others. Now we're moving into a higher interest rate environment. Productivity is going to be the key because you can't count on population growth to be the driver. Productivity has been a problem around the world, and it's you can see the gaps of productivity. This is a chart of the US versus Europe going back to the 1800s. And it's really government policy and technology that are the big drivers. And we had this big move with a massive rebuild in the US and around the world after World War II. We had an influx of labor that came in during that time. Europe lost some of the labor that they were experiencing. So they got the worst of both worlds. And then you fast forward to the 2000s, and the big tech boom that was going on in the US was not as well participated in by Europe. So that's one of the problems that you've seen longer term productivity problems there. This is just an example of the gap for 2023. And what you can see is Europe on a GDP per capita basis was maybe half of what the US was. Their productivity contributions was much less, and their labor gap was also higher. This is part of the problem that exists between the US and Europe and a problem for European competitors. And you add to that the industrial policies that were put in place by the US, which further worsen the gap. And then we have better access to energy here. You can make the case of why capital continues to flow into the US. And the FT had an interesting article, foreign direct investment and foreign dollars coming in are growing again in the US and picking up the spread there. So looking at, what does this all mean for the world? I think the demographic issue continues to weigh on global growth. We're already seeing leading nations that are at peak populations are already starting their decline. That's going to be a very different mindset. We keep thinking about it as out in the future, but it's here right now, and it's changing how businesses operate. Innovation and immigration are going to be the key to addressing the population, labor, both skills and availability, and inflation concerns. Productivity is the antidote for inflation. So we have to get our productivity up to bring inflation down, even with the potential concerns about tariffs and the other stuff out there. Those are more one-off issues. We have embedded inflationary pressures that are going to be with the system for a while. I think aging and birth death rates are really making the need for sound immigration policies to be put out. And you have to get past, avoid the rhetoric and the ideology that's been driving immigration policies and the immigration debate, and get into what are the problems each country needs to solve. In the US, we have major problems with workers' gaps in big areas like home health aides for an aging population, construction workers for the homes that needed to be built to deal with the housing problems, or to put up the factories as we bring onshoring back. We need to design immigration policies to solve problems, not to deal with rhetoric and ideology. So we have to get past that. You have to move past the anti-immigration sentiment. And part of that comes around the world from foreigners coming in, not wanting to adapt to the cultural norms of the country they're moving to, and the country they're moving to not adjusting to the fact that they need these people to come in to grow. So everyone has to adjust to what were the old norms become new norms and become better countries because of that. The US is a great example of that with the waves of immigrants we've had from all over the world. Each nationality brought something new to the table and made us a better place. I think conflicts have led to forced displacement that continues to rise, and we have to make sure immigration policies provide asylum for those who are being mistreated, and you can't ignore the problems. They're real. The persecution that's going on for all sorts of reasons continues to rise at a time we should have been past a lot of this, but a lot of the politics and geopolitics and forced borders and things like that in the Middle East or we're still living with those conflicts out of World War II that are going to continue to lead to further conflicts going forward. But I think the other thing we have to keep in mind is the battle for talent is going to be critical to economic and national security and to social success going forward, and how we bring them all in is going to matter on a global basis. More specifically for the US, where should we be? I think the idea of closing the borders right now immediately is fully appropriate. Most countries have very strong border policies. Some make it virtually impossible to get in. We are very liberal in that area, and people are taking advantage of it. But you need to allow authorized immigration for social, economic, and security purposes now. The flow of immigrants across the border right now uncontrolled is just inappropriate. Immigration should be managed to ensure that we get the best talent, get match labor supply, skills and availability to the gaps that we have while providing asylum for those who need. The H-1B visa program is at $85,000. That is for students, undergrads and graduates. It's $65,000 for undergrad, $20,000 for graduates. Those should be expanded by multiples. If I was king for a day, they would be at $500,000. I would take the H-2 visa program, which is for filling skills gaps that we have or labor gaps that we have, and aggressively fill home health care and construction worker to do that and other skills gaps that we have. Healthcare is an area that we need more skills coming in, and we need to find a better way to get them integrated. I think these are the things that we need to look at. In the US, we have a fertility problem. Immigration is the answer for that. We're not going to change the birth rates here anytime soon. And even if we started today, by 2050 and 2020, by 2100, we'd still have problems. China's one-child policy is a great example of that, but there are one-child policies being put in place by families today because they can't afford to compete. And I think we need to combine immigration policies with a clear assessment of the labor gaps and our national mandate for security and to continue to attract talent if you want to grow. So it's there in front of us. For the US, we could create a policy that would ensure that we don't have a labor problem or a growth problem from a labor force issue going forward for the long term. Other countries can do it, but you need strong leadership and you need to change the mindset of the existing population. And training's a big part of that and how you help the people who are being disrupted to have creative destruction move forward is going to be key. So Mark, I'll stop there and open it up for debate and discussion. We avoided the really controversial stuff.
Not yet.
So far.
So, thoughts, questions?
Adam was up quick.
Adam, go for it.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Stephen. Great presentation, one that is across the world and will be with us for centuries. Back to controversial. The first a comment, then my question. The immigration problem has been a problem in the United States for decades. My question is, will Trump resolve this? And let me make one more comment here. Venezuela is the second largest nationality of illegal immigrants coming into the United States. And if Trump thinks he's going to be able to collect and ship them all back to Venezuela, that's going to be a matter of negotiations. And one of the negotiators in that will likely be Vladimir Putin. That's it. Thank you, Stephen.
So will Trump solve the problem? No. Will he start to move us to fixing the problem? I think securing the borders is fundamental to that. And getting the criminals, the people who've been here illegally, who've committed crimes out, I think, well, that would be a win for the system. I think beyond that, you start to cut into workers that we need to drive the economy forward. So I think securing the borders is the first thing, and closing it down, and then getting the criminals out. If he did that alone, that would be a success, because you would dial down a lot of the anti-immigration rhetoric without hurting the businesses and being too disruptive on the families. I think the issue of how far this goes and does it stay in the realm of not being too disruptive is how aggressive do we get and bring the military into it, and how much forcible displacement goes on that becomes headline making versus kind of normal flow of things. So I don't think he'll solve the problem, but I think he'll start to get to a better debate, which is not the two ideologies fighting each other, but what's a practical solution to solving the problems that we have. I think we're moving towards that debate better.
Thank you, Stephen.
Andy?
Stephen, you're 100% on with the whole immigration sort of punch list. And to that, I would point out that a lot of the pushback in the world, first of all, this is looking back, say our immigration problem has also been our solution. If you look at the last decade or even more, with our internal negative population growth, without immigration, we would actually be shrinking. But to your point, though, let's look at what happened about those countries, the rest of the world, Canada, Germany, Sweden, that took in a lot of these recent immigrants. The failure appears to be not that they opened the doors, but they had no plan to do anything after they opened the door. And we should take a page out of that book. You talk about, deporting criminals is one thing. What about all the PhDs from Ivy League universities that have 6 weeks to get a job before their student visas run out and they're deported? It's kind of ridiculous that we educate the world and then send them out of the country. So 100% on board with all those things. And fixing the problem isn't maybe the wrong terminology, is we actually have an opportunity. And those countries who took in all those Ukrainians had an opportunity that they didn't take advantage of. And all the Canadians had to do was check and record everybody that came in, and we wouldn't be complaining about them crossing the border. That's all I have to say.
Agreed.
Yeah. Yeah, see, absolutely fascinating. Go ahead, just 2 seconds to go back to Adam's point. If anyone can look up the video of Marco Rubio's questioning for his confirmation and his comments on Venezuela, I think, yeah, Adam, you posted that. I had to search for a link, but that was extremely informative.
Yes, it was.
What the situation is in Latin America and Cuba. Not an easy one at all, to say the least. But sort of getting back, this whole notion of kind of replacing the children that we're not having is a really interesting one. And you kind of fast forward to it's like 2025 already, so you almost can't say 2030 because that's too soon. But maybe like 2035. There's an interesting pilot project that's, I think, kicking off this week in Jacksonville at the Mayo Clinic, where they have fitted out robots to accompany all of the nurses. That, as I understand, all the nurses in that hospital. So each nurse is going to have like their own robot to take care of administrative tasks and things like that. That could be very interesting and sort of begs the question in terms of what the real potential is for AI and robotics to replace essentially what we're talking about is younger workers. As the older workers are going to be around, but the younger workers are perhaps not going to be there. So that's something to ponder. I'll just leave that one out there.
Yeah, I think robotics is going to be a big part of the solution for countries and companies, but it doesn't solve the fact that the world is, you have to have enough people making babies to keep going. So it's a really interesting dynamic. In some cases, we're overpopulated, in other cases, we're underpopulated. So it's a very interesting dynamic. And the other element is how much longer do people work in the workforce than they have previously? How many of the required retirement ages at 60 start moving up around the world to much higher levels? Interesting to see.
Are we looking at the Wall-E movie?
So, Rob,
Go ahead, Nick.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Steve. I'm buzzing in from DC. I went to a lot of the inauguration this past weekend.
do we have any pictures
One on
of
immigration.
do we have any pictures of you with not Mick Jagger, but like Elon Musk and all the rest?
They're coming.
I think there was a Boris picture. I see Mariana there. There was a Boris picture. I posted up. But the two thoughts. One is with respect to immigration. The attack and the sort of the initial comments with respect to the border, south of the border. But I think Trump's support on HB1 behind the Musk and the tech initiatives was pretty specific and solid. So, Steve, the thought is this somewhat you throw a shotgun of things, but then you govern towards the mean. And then just kind of related, what are your thoughts about thoughts of Canada and sort of the expansion and that being sort of the 51st state? I mean, what are your economic and practical thoughts around that?
I would say leave national sovereignty to, we have to respect national sovereignty. What is interesting about Trump's governing style is he does have countries reacting to his threats or his statements that are interesting and opening them up to doing things that you wouldn't get without those statements. So even on immigration, I think India came out today and said that they would take 18,000 people back that are here illegally to their country. You're seeing countries react to his statements with an openness to negotiate. So it's the whole what's reality versus what's negotiating ploy. And that's going to be the hard part for us as investors for the next 4 years again. It's also the hard part for other government leaders, how they behave. He's already thrown a big monkey wrench in with the China tariffs, and Xi has made some steps to say that he wants to dial down the rhetoric. And what if all of a sudden you have the US and China working together to make the world a better place, dial down, stop the wars, and get the economy back on track? That would be.
Well, that was one of the themes of last week's briefing.
And they're coming out. They sent a very senior guide to the inauguration. They are continuing to say the right things to push things together. So I think it's really interesting. You have to watch Trump with his power of persuasion versus what his policies are actually going to be. I think particularly on immigration, he's going to close the borders. He's going to throw out criminals. Beyond that, he knows he's getting into areas that could hurt him economically. So he could hit his campaign pledges if he just does the first two. So I think that is the way he's going to play it. And I think he will get other countries to react, but I don't think Canada is particularly worried about that. I think the Greenland issue is interesting from a national security and a resource issue, but that's just winning, cutting a deal with them and having a better security relationship. You don't have to take over the country. So I think those are all kind of the stuff you don't pay attention to with him.
I think he wants to be paid for the security that he's providing in Greenland. Yeah, with a call option that he can get the rare metals if he wants. But anyway, Stephen, just to stay on the immigration, do you have any?
Anthony, sorry, Anthony. Just hold. And I know you have insight from your Danish side of your house, but Dieter and Tim and Roger got their hands up, so just hold your
Apologies.
horses. Dieter.
Yeah. Hi, good morning. Stephen, I would like to get your opinion about the H-1B point. So during the event, we saw that the 5 top CEOs of the technology company have been invited and sitting there, which is a good sign. I know they donated a lot, and this was their entrance ticket. But on the other hand, they are the biggest demanders for H-1B visas. There's a big battle for talents for AI and robotics. Asia, India, Europe, everybody wants to have the talents from big development and universities. You think he will listen to these guys and make a fast decision and raise the 85,000 to whatever so that we get the talents first? What is your opinion there?
I think he was surrounded by the biggest cases for H-1B visas in the country. If you just think about who's running IBM, who's running Microsoft, who's running NVIDIA, who's running AMD, who's running Google, who founded Google, and you just go through the list. Without H-1B visa students, we wouldn't be the country we are, just like we wouldn't be the country we are without the Irish, the Chinese, every other immigrant that's come through, the Italians, everyone that's come through and made this country what it is. So I think that's the latest wave. If you want to be a leader in tech, you have to be attracting the best and the brightest minds from all over the world. And, you know, it's Russia, Ukraine, China, other parts of the world that are driving it. We have to be there. So I think that's part of it. I think there's a lot of emphasis on H-1B visas. I think you also have to think about the other less skilled labor that's absolutely essential to moving the country forward, or the craftsmen that we need to be here that we're short in supply of. We have to rebuild our grid. We have to rebuild big parts of the country. The Southeast, California, LA, all that's going to require a lot of labor. You know, where there's food problems around the world, you need people doing actually in the fields picking. So those are the things we got to do. We just have to get the people in for it and have the right policies. You have to know what the numbers are you're looking for too. Immigration should be very deliberate, not ideologic or whimsical as it's been.
So Tim?
How do we know the severity of the labor shortage here? And I point to every time the government sort of moves into a market, it distorts the markets and kind of misallocates capital in some instances. And I think the largest employer in the U.S. economy are sort of like federal, state, and local government. So how do we not know that sort of these oversized governments, if it was shrunk a little bit, you could redeploy capital to fill some of these roles that are vacant. You know, I think of people who, but I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, I think I don't know the government's numbers. It's a big employer number. I'm blanking off the top of my head the actual numbers, but when we downsize the government, you're going to redeploy people, but I don't think that's going to be the driver for it. I think you have big gaps in areas that you have gaps in. We have gaps in the healthcare profession throughout. Major gaps, whether it's nurses, home health aides, or even doctors. The hospitals are really well short of what they need, and you move out to rural areas, it gets even worse. You have tech companies that are seeing big gaps in skills still, but you have construction throughout the country has gaps in labor. You look at the shape up crews when you go to the East End of Long Island, look in the Hamptons. They have the day workers lining up like crazy. So there's plenty of jobs. That's not the issue. And that's how you know there's a skills gap problem when you try and get the work done and see how long it takes you to get anything done these days. So I think it's pretty obvious what areas have the biggest shortfalls. I think it's how do you get the people retrained, and the other thing that we have to deal with now is we have people who are going to be put out of work by the new technologies. How do you get them set up for the new world they live in if they can be trained? I think those are all the things that really mess up the immigration policy of, they spend so much time protecting people who you shouldn't be protecting, and you should be training for something else and missing out on the opportunities. And I think that's where the creative destruction of the U.S. comes into play and has worked for us. We just have to get better at training people.
Roger?
Thanks, Mark. Hey, Stephen. Stephen, I know you mentioned one example of India taking back 18,000, but how does the deportation of the undocumented people here work practically? So, for example, I mean, yeah, you can have a universal policy or in place, but practically with each individual country, how do you deport so many tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people? Isn't it just a bilateral negotiation with that country? So, for example, if you were to up and say, I think Adam mentioned part of Venezuela, if you're up and say, okay, I'm going to deport 50,000 people back to Venezuela, if Venezuela says they're not taking it, what do practically? Do they not let the plane land? And even if the plane lands, I'll take them back into the country physically. So I guess these practical logistics, I think, will impact the overall policy if there is a standardized policy for 199 countries in the world as you deport people back. So I'm just trying to figure out how it works, because only unless the other country is willing to take those people back, then it works. Forget the practicality of rounding them up in the US and getting them on a plane or a boat and shipping them to that country. Because if that country doesn't play ball, then there's a big issue. So practically, then it means that you then have to negotiate with 199 countries, all individual, all due to leverage, negotiating power. It just becomes a mess. Is there a way around that, or am I reading too much into it?
No, I think you're reading it right. The way my understanding of it is, I don't know if we have the immigration attorney on. It's the Golden Visa.
Oh, Amy Short? I don't think Amy's on.
The way I understand it right now, if you come into Kennedy, for example, and you don't have the right documentation to come as a visitor, the airline puts you on a plane back to that country, and that country has to take you because they let you out of that country to the US without the right documentation. That's how it's supposed to work. You're right, though, on a practical basis, I don't think we're going to be sending, planes and planes and planes back packed with people. I don't know how we do that. I don't know how they bring in the Army to get this done and all that. That becomes a legal issue because the Army's not supposed to do certain things inside the country. So I think you have to look at all those. But Roger, I think you're 100% right. That's why I think the practical issue will be close the borders and deport criminals, a subset of the criminals, not the whole group of them. I don't think they're going to get behind all the stuff that people are most worried about yet. Because I don't think we can do that logistically. So I think you're right.
Adam?
Yeah, a little bit of a plug for the LATAM panel in Miami. That issue is going to be discussed on the panel. And that is a serious issue. How do you get all these illegal migrants back to their home countries? And that's going to be a process of negotiations with Venezuela in particular. That's the second largest group in the United States. And that is going to be negotiated. That very well may be part of the Ukrainian ceasefire negotiation, because Putin can put pressure on Maduro to accept those migrants. So all of these, in the center of gravity for the ceasefire is going to be economy. And that's the same thing with Venezuela.
Maybe Putin should just take the migrants. He needs the people.
He does.
But they go right to the front. They go right to the front lines.
Yeah.
That's right. They go to the front lines. But Russia is also having a problem, obviously, with illegal migrants and working migrants. They've cracked down on their source of migrants. That's Central Asia, and it's very difficult.
Actually, that's part of the pressure that Trump's trying to put on Mexico is to stop them from coming up through the pass into Mexico and then into the US. So, but that's how China's getting a lot of people into the country is through LATAM. So it is really a China issue as well. And Trump going back to his relationship with Xi becomes even more important.
So Michael and then Wanda.
Stephen, at the start of the conversation part of today, you said that you avoided the controversial issues. And I'm just curious what you consider those to be.
The ones we were into now. Listen, I think, in the US in particular, this country is built by immigrants. And getting this right should be a no-brainer for us of any country in the world. We should be getting this one right, and it shouldn't be this hard. Our politicians have made it much harder than it needs to be because they're trying to push for dollars and things like that as opposed to trying to solve the right problem. So that's the reality. If we get better people in PC, we'll be better off. That's right now. Wanda?
So let's assume that we accept this thesis that Trump's outrageous statements are starting negotiating points. And let's leave aside the ethics, sovereignty issues. Trump gets the results, but meanwhile, his base that elected him is being energized by those populist ideas that the final deals may not be that close to. So, Stephen, my question to you is, if we accept that that Trump being a master negotiator, how do you expect the populism, including populism around immigration, to play out as the policies will be executed? Thank you.
I think it's going to be about the economy. I think if the economy does well, the base won't care. If the economy doesn't do well, the base will care. I think what really got Biden was the immigrants coming in and inflation going up the way it did at that time made people feel like things were worse than they actually were. So I think it's the perception of the economy as much as anything that'll drive it. So I think that's it. I think it's perception, not reality, that's going to the perception of the economy that will drive his voter base. But the other thing is his voter base doesn't matter to him anymore because he can't run for office again. So you just have to keep that in mind too. His
succession anointment plan?
I don't think he cares about his succession plan other than his agenda, the Trump agenda going forward. But if it doesn't go forward, he'll just blame whoever went in after him, who's Republican or Democrat. So I don't think that's really the driver for him.
He's going to be a kingmaker.
I think he views himself as king already. So I don't know what's next for him.
Well, he could follow Putin and change the constitution.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not in the worst case camp, but for our country, so not there.
It's good. You pointed that out, Wanda. I mean, apparently he's made a lot of money on these coins.
I think they pulled back the other day, so he lost a lot of money on the coins today.
Yeah, whatever. But pull back from a peak. Giovanni. Sorry?
I was going to say, you haven't made the money until you've exited.
Yeah.
Stephen, can you talk to Stephen? Can you talk to the price sensitivities of meat packing and vegetable picking and so on and so forth to migrant labor. If if you listen to sort of truckers and farmers and so on and so forth, they sort of say that their farm or their meat packing place or whatever, that if they don't have the labor force, America won't have any vegetables in 2 or 3 days. During the pandemic, a lot of meatpacking places shut down because of COVID for very short periods of time. I didn't see that much of a stop in ground beef and so on and so forth. So could you talk a little bit about what will happen if migrant labor gets scared about coming into America or picking lettuce or packing meat? What could you give us some sense of prediction as to what will happen to the price of meat and vegetables and so on and so forth? How sensitive is the price?
Well, let's put it this way. I think there's roughly, by various estimates, 11 million unauthorized immigrants in the US. I think 40% of that total would be in various stages of trying to be here legitimately. So just say it's 6 million, 5.5 million people that are here illegally. They're still going to be working. We're not going to deport all of them out in day one. So I don't think you'll see a big impact in the near term. If they were successful in getting a lot of people out very quickly, then you might see an impact. But people are here. I think closing the borders doesn't change the supply and demand dramatically in the near term. It's over time. So I don't think that's as big an issue as people think. And as I said, I agree with Roger. I don't think logistically we'll get that many people out that fast. I think at most, I think we had 1 or 2 million people go out in 1 year under Obama. I think that's been the highest we've gotten. So I'm not particularly worried about that in the near term.
Bill?
Yeah, I think.
By the way, are you going to play pickleball with us?
I'm gonna try. Probably may not be able to be there Saturday morning, but certainly.
Okay.
So
Just
yeah.
want everyone to know on this Zoom, he said he'd never played before, and he
correct.
And he played rather well. So I'm ready. I'm better now. Just saying.
I'm sure you are, and you're gonna whoop me for sure. So no, that was total pride. It's like I wasn't gonna be embarrassed. So anyway, no, I actually, Mark, I wanted to go back to because I think it's an interesting point about succession. And I would throw out a phrase of, is Trump going to be the rising tide that floats all boats? And if so, and he's successful in all that, then I think the succession is almost independent. And it would probably boil down to the person who could best articulate the way to continue forward from that point. This is assuming like best possible outcome over the next 4 years. And
sorry, Bill, what's the rising tide in this case?
Yeah, the rising tide. So this would be all the wonderful things that Trump talked about in terms of a growing economy, growing incomes, better GDP, lower inflation, the realization of the golden age that he's talking about. So what I'm to think about it is that I don't think the way that the program necessarily is structured that it's going to favor one group or another. I do think that it could be a broad rising tide, all income groups, Republican, Democrat, blue collar, white collar, et cetera, et cetera. This is an endpoint, but it's probable. So if that happens, then I think the succession is perhaps somewhat independent, and it all goes back to a statement of is Trump the Trump movement, is it truly a movement and ultimately independent of his personality? And will it be enduring? Or is it really just a lot of platitudes that are hitting people in the right places? I hope it's the former and not the latter. Because that would be really good.
I suspect that by the midterms, Trump's legacy will be less of an issue, and it'll be who are the potential people that can lead the country after that. And both the Republican and Democratic parties have to decide what their platform is going to be for the midterms, and they're starting on that now. And I think whoever puts out the better platform for that midterm election will be the ones to determine what happens next. I think we're giving Trump too much credit, and I would also just say the mandate that he had the day after the election is very different with all the votes in and how the House and Senate actually shook out. He doesn't have as much of a mandate as everyone thought day one. So I think he's in a different spot. I don't think this is a whole new way of governing in the United States for the long term. That would be.
Mark and Steve, just one quick comment on succession. Mark, this goes to something you laid down a great framework for. There's an enormous amount of power displayed this past weekend by the Vice President, J.D. Vance, and former senator. And then just the talk of, I think, Vivek going from Dodge to, I think the word is governor of Ohio, or his backup, the Senate seat. Ohio is, well, more so Vance is really well positioned to ride the wave. And then also him having, Peter Thiel backing and, and youth on the side and having diversity as a wife. So I'd be curious, Mark, as to you or Jack's thoughts on Vice President being from Ohio and your engagements with him, out of curiosity.
I have to say, so when we did our Ohio tour, he was running for Senate, and he was considered controversial at the time. Trump is Trump, right? He's a force. I don't know how he did it. He just, by the way, I watched that movie the other night, The Apprentice. But I don't think too many people can that's a different kind of force. So I don't know. I think people can play a second fiddle nicely, but I don't know if they can play first fiddle. I know. As far as Ohio's an interesting place, the Buckeyes, I have to say, from last night. I haven't seen the Cavaliers of Virginia in the championship round, but
the one other tidbit is, remember, he was endorsed, and Donald Trump Jr. put an enormous amount of political capital behind Vance. So there's concept of succession, and maybe this is part of the cover that he has and the strength. But like I said, there's a lot of respect going towards Vance, and I think in some of the polls he's viewed as a clear number one for 4 years from now. So
it'll be if I was saying, if the kingmaker says, all right, stay with me, like we've seen this before where presidents hand off to their vice, so that could be. So I think if he has the kingmaker, then he's a force. By the way, and Jack can weigh in on all this stuff. I thought it was really interesting. Really, there was a time where people didn't want to be associated with Trump, right? That's changed. I've been invited to co-host something, or we 361 to co-host something in Vegas, tech and healthcare, and and to have dinner with the Trump son. And, you know, and people are open about it. Like this is, you know, these are the vice kingmakers of a different sort. So I want to take the good without the bad. Like I want like all those things that you speak of, but there was a question I think that was posed. I thought you were going to answer it. Like how do you, was it Bill you were asking or then you asked a question back to Jack. Jack, do you want to, how do you see Ohio politics?
Look, among the people that have flocked over to become a member of the flock, JD was one of the, he was in the first tier, and it was remarkably close to all of his commentary about negative commentary about Trump. So
yeah.
it raised some questions. Pardon me for even bringing this up in a political context, but raised some questions about his fundamental ethics. I mean, he went from extreme Trump's Hitler-like to, gee whiz, maybe I like him after all, particularly after his son visited recently and made me some promises that haven't yet been detailed.
Well, to Rob's point, that Trump's very transactional. Apparently Vance is too.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. And I think Vance, you know, at age 44, 4 or so years from now, Vance basically will become a JFK, running for the presidency, and so he gets the benefit of
that reminds me of the debate with Dan Quayle. You're no JFK, but my daughter was asking me who is JFK. But I think what's interesting is this back to Ohio. How about this company Anduril? Yeah, is anyone following this? Vlad posted it in the chat. They're putting, you know, why are they building their next wave of weaponry in Ohio? And I think it's an interesting, you know, and it goes back to talent. The first time Senator Husted, he wrote to me, he was like, how do we keep the talent in Ohio? Asking me in New York. Like, I don't know, you know, I guess to have opportunities. That was an interesting development. Now everybody wants to invest in this company. Is anybody involved with this company?
I'm not conflicted, but this is a salute to the Vance power and thinking about the future.
But if I can make a quick comment, and maybe Jack can chime in on this. We had a chemical company, we were developing defense related products. Mm-hmm. And Ohio was very much a center, particularly University of Dayton,
that's where they put the position of the company.
Yeah, that's always been a center for development in materials, as well as for the M1 tank and other military products.
And that's largely influenced by Wright-Patterson Air Force Base.
Exactly, that's right.
And related military facilities that are in and around Dayton and have been for 100 years.
Right, they have leading materials science research centers in the country.
Well, and Jack, one of your friends that sold the company to Procter & Gamble, what's his name?
Imes sold he sold the Imes dog food company to P&G.
There you go. Sorry, who? Any had your hand up then, Michael?
Yeah, just Anduril, just 2 seconds. This guy basically is taking the SpaceX approach to military. Instead of taking years and billions to create things, they're using the newest, best off-the-shelf, high-tech equipment available, incorporating it into weaponry And the off-the-shelf stuff has come so far that it's a rough equivalent of what the best of the best were creating even 5 years ago. So they're growing very quickly. They've got a lot of government support now. It's the next SpaceX of weaponry, and they've really
But just on that point, they raised 1.5 billion. Is there an offering afoot right now?
I don't think it's open because I was with some people that invested with them about a month ago, and I'm not sure there's anything left.
Right. Is there another offering happening?
I'm sure there will be because they're going to grow like wildfire. I don't think
It sounds like we should do a secondary then.
maybe
we'll take this offline, but that sounds like this.
One last comment, Mark. The guy running it is a sort of Elon Musk type guy. He doesn't want to go public anytime soon, lose control of his company.
But he was talking very differently in that interview, the Bloomberg interview that was on our chat that Vlad Kapustin put on.
Yep.
Then he was also talking about democratizing access, which is meaning retail stupid money. But still, he's a can-do guy. I'm intrigued. I don't know enough.
There's a zillion SpaceX investors, not a public company.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. But you can only go so far on numbers into the SEC. Okay.
Mark, I had something to say about the immigration thing, which I think ties into everything that's been spoken about, which is that.
And you can go back to Greenland too.
Yeah, but
you want to talk about Greenland?
Actually, I don't want to talk about that. It's security, and I don't want to breach any. I don't want to be in a gray zone. But on the engineering thing, you've got about a 10-to-1 ratio, Asia, China in particular, and then US. And that's been dominant for a while, and it's not being spoke about it. And I also think it ties back into the visa problem, although there is the exception visa that if you've got particular skills, you can get through that, and they've allowed that to continue. But just to tie back into the whole tech thing and to go beyond the idea that the presidency, the duration's 4 years, in reality, one has to think way beyond that, which I think is what Steve, you do, and what we all do here. And so going beyond that is that from the labor point of view, the engineer is just one of them. We are producing in the inverse of that, we're producing more lawyers than we are engineers, which is just part of the mantra and dogma that we've created here, how we transact in the US. I particularly, for one, am not a fan of that. But do you have any comments about that? Because that's pretty serious. And when I say 10-to-1, that's not an exaggeration. And then to the point which already came up in the call, you complete and you got to compete you complete and you have to compete to stay to stay in the US and be employed here, as opposed to shipping yourself back. So it makes no sense. And what it does, it means only a few people can be the next Andy Roll or Palantir or whatever it's going to be. Only the fittest can survive, and everyone else is competing for, they're going back somewhere. So it's just something to think about.
Yeah, I think the numbers are the numbers. You're right. There's more engineering students from those areas, which is why we need the right policies. So I just think I think it gets back to matching up the jobs we need to fill and the talent we need to have with what our inventory is. And when we don't have enough inventory overall, and we don't have enough inventory in certain areas, it's just matching it up. It's not that hard. It really, to come up with a good policy isn't that hard if you get the politicians out of the way.
And by the way, Anthony, to borrow a little bit of Shakespeare about lawyers, did you see this, that if basically AI can produce the S1s and with 3% of the human talent needed?
No,
so
I didn't see that. What?
So basically, the legal profession is kind of, it also is, we've been waiting for this to happen. And a lot of banking, right? We're going to, in Naples and Miami, we're going to show you our AI platform. I don't need a whole big onboarding form. All I need is your website and maybe your deck, and I can create an info memo. But what we need is collaboration, scoring, Jack Wyant like QCA processes of collaboration and relationship change. But the time of the human elements here, that's why I'm very curious where lawyers are going to have to change what their value propositions in a lot of professions. We haven't
Including
talked about that.
engineers. Computers are coding, the AI's coding now.
Well, yeah, it's like the worst profession to have in a way, if you can be replaced.
So I think all round the intuitive part of the process has not been captured yet. That may allude to the soul, the instinct, the rubber meets the road experience, intuition, and all of that. And that's sort of the next thing, right? Can you replicate that? And if you can, how? And then obviously you get into a whole new conundrum of, it's pretty scary that, right? Because then you create the human robot, as in the word human. That's not really a good thing. You really want the human to still be elite and stay in control, except at least in my opinion, right? We want to maintain our autonomy and individuality in who we are as human beings and be rewarded for the life path that we've gone through, right? You did a series of steps and hopefully you evolve and now you're smarter, and hopefully the AI could be an application part of the program. Like, how can you apply it to make yourself better? But what you don't want is for the AI to get too smart, too sexy, too feely. Because then what use do we have? I mean, how do we just exist at that point? I mean, this is kind of a George Orwell thing, but that's I think the question.
Oh, Michael, then Adam.
Okay, boy, so many topics. I do want to comment.
What's different from any other week, right?
Yeah. Well, I've been waiting patiently. I do want to comment on Ohio, but as far as
it is different. You usually don't wait patiently.
Andrew, Columbus area is actually a natural, logical place for them to locate. There's a lot of industrial robot activity going on, engineering, manufacturing capabilities. So it kind of makes sense. But going back to Ohio in politics and Vivek running for governor, I don't think he's going to get a super warm reception from people. Houston, it's interesting that he decided to go for the Senate seat rather than wait and run for governor, because I think he would have been pretty much a shoo-in. So that's kind of interesting.
I guess there's some, because you can always go back. I don't know.
I don't think he will. I think that's one of the reasons that DeWine waited in announcing the appointment, is there were discussions going on.
I got to reconnect with those guys.
Jack, are we gonna have JD against the mayor of Cincinnati for the presidency? That was your prediction.
Hopefully the group will still visit Ohio, even though we might have some Democrats speaking. The mayor of Cincinnati is a Democrat and will be. With respect to John Husted, the lieutenant governor, soon to be senator, he was a shoo-in, as was just referenced. Absolute shoo-in. He's hitting on all cylinders. He's in love with the entrepreneurial ecosystem, which has been somewhat of a new discovery for him. And he was integral to the Intel project that attracted so much attention and funding to Ohio. So he's a good guy. And along with Mark and others, I think very highly of him, even though I'm on the other team. But, what are teams for anyway?
Same team.
I don't think his love of entrepreneurs is all that new in tech. I mean, I want to say it was about 3 years ago. I flew down to Columbus with Bernie Marino on his jet to meet with him on issues related to tech and entrepreneurship and whatnot. And that's been kind of his wheelhouse in the Devine administration.
Yeah. I give up. No, you're right. My reference to new and your response illustrates the multiple decade age difference in our ages.
Well, I want to say
I was thinking he showed up 20 years ago.
But
No, he's been on the case.
He came to our New York conference before COVID, right?
Actually, yeah, I think it might have been the January of 2020.
No, it was fall. October, September, November 2019. He was a co-keynote.
Because I just savaged politicians
with you,
and then he came up.
Yeah, he was a co-keynote with
I was in the audience
at our 2000s. I'll look it up. It's in our synopses.
But listen, since we're talking about Ohio, what's the scoop on Vivek? I mean, he was there right next to the one and only, and now he's on the outs.
Who?
Ramaswamy.
Oh, yeah.
Is there an inside scoop yet that is filtered all the way to 361?
Not to this 361er. Anyone else? I mean, he's no Elon Musk.
But he's out of the project.
He's off of Doge now.
Yeah, that's why I think.
Yeah.
What do you mean he's out of the project, Jack? He's out of the Dodge project?
Yeah, he is severed with the Doge, Dodge, whatever it is, project.
I didn't know that.
If I may, it's hard to have room for two people with that kind of influence in one room, So with Elon, he probably felt himself wanting all of the attention because the one thing about Ramaswamy is he's an excellent speaker. I'm not really sure about how his experience shores up to what he looks like.
But Sue, is he an excellent speaker or is he an excellent parrot?
I think, well, no, I wouldn't say he's a parrot. I think that he is truly inspired by Donald Trump. And so I think his feelings are genuine, but I think that he's more of a salesman. I'm not necessarily impressed with him myself, but with Elon, can you imagine working with him? I don't think so. Not me, not as a leader, not a co-leader.
Well, it won't be long. It won't be long. And we'll be asking you to give us some insights into how Elon has taken over Donald's job.
Well, let's hope that doesn't, that's the thing too, especially people in Asia are talking about that right now. A lot of the people that I work with that have a lot of money and are doing a lot of business, they talk about Elon and what his agenda might be aside from what maybe Donald Trump is aware that it is. So that will be interesting. Maybe he's so in line with Donald Trump, he's an open book, but who knows?
Well, Elon is also risking quite a bit regarding his China market. That's his second largest market.
But if you watched last night, I watched as he was signing some of these executive orders. He was so much softer on China, but not at the same time. Like he said that there should be a joint venture for TikTok and that maybe the US is interested and they would pay TikTok half the value. So isn't that different? So I think he's way more flexible than I think a lot of people give him.
Well, there's another guy was at our Miami event that's involved, right? Kevin O'Leary.
Oh yeah.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
To Sue's point, that's why Elon's sitting right next to Trump, to Sue's point.
Look, I'm just as we're trying to figure out what are we going to be talking about at our 500th briefing. I think we're day 2, right? rubber hasn't fully hit the road, there's gonna be something's gonna, there's gonna be there's some interesting alliances, but I think there could be some interesting divergences that will evolve. And who knows, was it Biden was worried about this oligarchic move? Which, is right, in some ways rightfully so. I'm curious how this could all, in a two-party system, how this all plays out. Everybody has to play ball.
It's interesting that I read a op-ed where somebody was saying Biden overlooked Soros maybe being one of those oligarchy type billionaires the last 4 years. So it's just perspective, I think. So we gotta keep things a little bit more in line. I think we give these guys way too much credit because they have a lot of money.
Well, the interesting alliance is really quite interesting in that.
We pull this back to the LATAM panel, Adam. Is that what you're doing?
No, but I can talk about it if you want.
Yeah, the fight for influence sources in Latin America between U.S., Russia, and China. Get it?
Well, actually, it's also related in that, Mikhail Hodorkovsky was at the inauguration.
That's
And
interesting. I missed him.
And there were some interesting other attendees at that particular cabinet reception the day before, rivals, and the two of them were speaking. So,
Premier.
well, I can't name names, but quite interesting how strange bedfellows all of this is creating.
Well, it's you know what it is? It's very Kissinger-like. Kissinger was very transactional.
You mean in a real politic way?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. I agree.
I don't know if it's refreshing. The Ukrainians are like somehow happy with this. I would have thought no, but there's also this tier regional thing. There's this carving up where Putin would be happy for U.S. to take over Panama, maybe even sacrifice Venezuela.
It gives him justification.
As long as he gets what he wants.
Right. It justifies.
I don't know, but that back to Wanda's point, right? Let's put ethics aside, but ethics have to be part of this too. So,
Adam, what was Putin saying today about changing his relationship with Belarus and creating a national security setup with him that the Belarus could be used for conflict that Russia's involved in? Did you see that today?
Like a NATO,
that's been going on for many years. Keep in mind that Belarus in Soviet times was also part of the anti-missile defense system, and it still is. So, Belarus is basically a vassal of Russia. And the only reason Lukashenko is still in power is because of Putin. If he gets anyone inside of the Belarusian government to capitalize on the civil unrest as what we had several years ago with the fraudulent elections, you're going to have problems there. Putin's going to have problems there. Putin has lost he's lost the ability to project power. And projecting into Latin America without China, he can't do it. So, also the Iranian Russia document, the comprehensive.
We're going to have Hamlet. By the way, we're going to have Hamlet in Miami. Hamlet Yusuf.
Yeah, he texted me. He just told me that. That comprehensive agreement is, I'm sorry, but 47 articles of rubbish. There's nothing in there that's really of any substance. It's just declarations. Anyway, enough.
It's never enough, Adam. We can pause, take a breath. There's a lot in this 250th briefing. You know what I like about, you know what I like is that Steven's PowerPoint slide skills. He gets visuals now. He was always bullet points. He's bullet points and visuals now. I think he took that from you, Bill.
It was, you keep saying you need more slides.
Always happy to share. Always happy to share.
All right, Jack, you wanted to? I think we should have guest briefing leaders or co-leaders.
Perfect.
And I think, Jack, you will be on the hook at one point, but you have to give both sides. You have to do it in the Stephen Burke style, that you don't just, give the Democratic position.
Well, hey,
sides.
Stephen,
Position, Jack, and the progressive.
he's established his style with a lot of witnesses, and we shouldn't impose upon it or try to become Stevens ourselves.
Absolutely not.
Let's let him be the one and only, and let's let him be the one who does briefing number 500 after the next election.
Okay, well, on that note, it's 12:30. We have everyone's showing their dogs. Stephen does have a dog, guide dog, on his.
Actually, we just turned our dog in at the beginning of the year to go on and work with a veteran or first responder. So in 3 months, he'll be at the beginning of April, he'll be assigned to a veteran or first responder and changes somebody's life.
Oh, that's awesome.
And my wife did all the work.
You did
And those are the best dogs, those golden retrievers, Stephen.
Yeah, it was a black lab in this case,
Oh,
but yeah,
well,
it's
they
going
have
on.
similar demeanor. Very.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, London looks like they're having fun over there. I'm not sure what they're doing.
Happy hour.
We are listening, but we also have a special guest.
Nice.
Who is that?
That's Coco.
Coco.
But yeah, my parents have retrievers, so we grew up with retrievers. So they are definitely the best.
Amazing.
Yeah, I've had a black lab and a yellow lab. It's time for a chocolate lab, I think.
Thank you, Mark.
Right.
Thank you, Stephen.
Maybe on that note.
Thank you all.
We'll see you many of you in Naples and Miami and places beyond. Thank you, everybody, for your contributions.
Bye-bye.
Don't forget the survey.
Survey 18, 361firm.com/survey 18. We have a lot of people that have done it. But I don't know if you got the latest batch. I'll get it to you.
One second.
My team, please do so. Thanks, everyone.